to do that, you better understand the problem. And if you don't understand the problem, then you're just developing content that doesn't meet the needs of the market, or hit the target, and that gets into the conversation.
The Industrial Growth Institute podcast connects you with the big thinkers, makers, and subject matter experts across all aspects of an integrated B2B industrial revenue growth function. From strategy, board oversight and transactions, through all the phases of manufacturing marketing, the complexities of industrial sales, and the nuances of marketing and sales technology and customer experience, I speak with guests who bring insights, innovative perspectives, best practices, and twists on traditional approaches. Each episode explores high-level thinking and in-the-weeds actionable tactics. If you enjoyed these discussions, then please help me out by liking and sharing the podcast, and especially by leaving a comment and giving a review. So with no further ado, let's jump into this episode. Hello there, I'm Ed Marsh, host of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. I have the privilege of chatting with fascinating people, each of whom has a particular insight of value for middle market industrial manufacturers who are focused on creating predictable revenue growth, trying to refine their program, or maybe just trying to get started. If you enjoy these conversations, please take a moment to indicate that. Give us a quick like, share, comment, or even a review on your favorite platform. It means a lot and helps us out. Today, I'll tell you, you're in for a treat. No chuckle, this is serious business, as I welcome Scott MacKenzie. Scott is, I would say, a force of nature. He's the founder of Industrial Talk Media, where, as he calls it, industry meets the power of media. Scott began his career as a lathing contractor and a journeyman lineman. And from there, with a number of steps along the way, he pursued undergrad and MBA degrees and has a long list of impressive marketing, sales, and management accomplishments. From that list, there's so many, it's hard to pick a couple highlights, but they include an early stint at PwC as a supply chain consultant, lots of experience with both organic and inorganic growth, a lot of M&A background, as well as taking a company public on the NASDAQ when he was president. I guess the bottom line is he's walked the talk. I mean, he even performed at the 1982 Super Bowl, and he has one of the greatest hat collections I know of, although often he can't wear them because it seems like he's always got headphones on now. Today, Scott runs his media company and has created really a fascinating business model that's got so much for industrial companies to learn from. He attends more trade shows than just about anyone I know. I think he's sitting in Orlando at a trade show right now, not in the bayou where he normally talks from. And I mean, it's intimidating for me to swap the microphone with him. He's such a great interviewer. I mean, this guy literally has a microphone as part of his name on LinkedIn. So buckle up for what I guarantee is going to be an amazing conversation. Welcome, Scott.
Wow, Ed. I don't know. I'm blushing.
Well, you should certainly be proud. I don't know if you need to blush. That's up to you, but I'm thrilled to have you.
It's absolutely an honor to be on your show. Absolutely. You've been on my show a number of times, and every time has been just an absolute wonderful and revealing. You're just a sage. Let's put it that way.
Well, now you're making me blush, but I've also enjoyed it because I've learned a lot from you about the process of interviewing. So orient us. Tell us right now, you're sitting somewhere in Orlando. You're at a trade show. You've probably been doing a lot of them lately. How much time are you traveling, and where are you today?
That's a great question. My dance card is getting full, and we were in Virginia last week, and now we're in Orlando this week, and they are industrial-centric type of conferences, which there are many, don't get me wrong. And normally I work with the organizers to be able to set up a mobile studio, a podcast studio, a video studio, and have conversations with individuals that are, I say it, trailblazers. They are just at the cutting edge of whatever industry, that innovation. And for me personally, I believe it's incumbent upon industry to educate. It's going really fast. Got to educate. There's a lot of information out there. Just do it. You have to do it. And you have to collaborate because of the speed at which market is evolving. You need to collaborate with individuals that are, shall I say, Sherpas in what they do. And then finally, that innovation component. It's happening whether you like it or not. You can come kicking and screaming, but it's happening. But those are the only, that's sort of like, I reiterate that all the time. And to do that for me, conferences tend to be a great source of conversations, providing that education opportunity for listeners. And then more importantly, it gives me a chance to elevate and highlight collaboration opportunities. And then, the innovation conversations are just off the charts. So,
Yeah, and we're going to dive a lot deeper into this. I think the interesting thing is that what you're describing that's necessary for industry to do, in many ways, you've done an analog in introducing content and media for industrial companies too. So you're really walking the talk. But let's back up. You didn't start out spending 200 days a year on the road at trade shows. And my intro, I don't think, could do you justice. And that background is really important for context for this journey that you've taken. Yep. So introduce yourself more completely. Tell us who Scott is and where you came from.
Yeah, I'm not going to do you did a great job. But the reality is that I took a company public and then I retired and then I didn't like that. And so I started another industrial company. And that was mostly the typical staff augmentation, heavy equipment, river work, that type of work. And I needed something. It's a very commoditized market. Anything that deals with staff augmentation, it's challenging. Don't get me wrong. And to be heard in that type of bloody water type of market, you have to have something special. So I'm traveling back from a client. I'm on the road. That's pretty much it. And I'm listening to a podcast because I'm always a big believer that I've got to continue to learn. And then it just dawned on me. I said, "Oh, hey man, I can do that." out of the blue, I just said, "I can do that." And then I contacted my IT department and I just said, "Hey guys, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to be podcasting."
Well, you had to put that DJ voice to work doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. And they said, "Well, what are you going to call it?" I said, I don't know. I just, what I wanted to do was have a tool that I could sort of Trojan horse market and get into companies and be able to create the relationships that are necessary to get the opportunities.
So when was this that you had that revelation?
Geez, that was 5-6 years ago, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we settled on it. What I did was I didn't know what to expect. So I'm chewing around Google and I'm trying to find the right mics and I'm doing it was just brand new. And finally settled upon all the equipment that I needed. And of course I spent way too much money. And I should have. I've trimmed down dramatically. So if anybody out there wants to know what to buy, just let me know because I'll tell you what to buy and what not to buy. Because
I know you've got an industrial academy, and I'm sure that you've got a course in there on how to set it up.
Yep, absolutely. And anyway, so I sat down. I did my first one, and it was just trying to figure out how to upload things to my website. And you get the picture. I had to test it. And then one, and then another one. And then what I realized that I can go to pretty much anybody, say, "Hey, I hear you have whatever going on." All that information is out there. I hear you have an outage going on. And I think the listeners of Industrial Talk, even though I might have had 2 at the time, 2 listeners, it doesn't matter. The listeners of Industrial Talk would like to know what's going on. And they would say yes. And I found out quickly that it's a story about them. They are the heroes. And it is. These are engaging conversations, and they are opportunities to really shine light into the windows of what is happening in industry, and we don't do enough of that. And so just fast forward 3,000 of these things later, boom, now it's this.
So 3,000. I was going to ask that number. I tried scrolling back through your website to see when the first episode was and how many there were. I couldn't make it back, so I knew I was going to have to ask you.
All over the place too,
But this I know that you don't want to rehash your background. Mm-hmm. But I think it's fascinating to understand your job running the terminal operation, because it feels to me like that is the essence of logistics and supply chain and manufacturing and industry in the U.S. Being at the intersection of the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico, where so much trade and so much industry happens. How did that help shape your opinion of American manufacturing?
Well, that's the first time that question has ever been asked. what is interesting with anything dealing with supply chain and the storage of material and these physical assets that are strategically located just because you're not going to stick a terminal in, you might, but it's not a good business model in some sort of remote area. You
Right.
want areas that are heavily have good rail access, good water access, and it just opens up opportunities and trucks. And so you get a greater appreciation of the amount of chemicals and products that are being used in the world of manufacturing. Some of the things I just didn't know. Case in point, um, molasses. Molasses is a product that is used heavily in industry. You just
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that, and feeding animals and manufacturing rum, all that stuff. But so there's and it's tight, right? It's from a supply chain perspective. You don't want delays. You want the ability to be able to deliver the product on time, level, and the quality that is needed, so that whoever Acme can keep their doors open and
Right.
producing whatever they produce. It and it happens day in and day out. The movement is just phenomenal.
It's a fascinating, integrated, and indescribably complex system that it all depends on.
It does. It just does. And you're moving ships and you're offloading ships and you're just putting it in rail and you're putting it in trucks. It's going to A to B to C to whatever. And it never ends.
Right.
Never ends.
Now, I think one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit further is that because it's so complex, whether we're talking about logistics or making a machine or an engineered system in a factory or whatever, the folks that live in that world tend to focus on those details and complexities. And it's great to have that experience, but sometimes that gets in the way of marketing. And along the way, you made this big shift. You went from being a PwC supply chain analyst to running businesses and focusing on operations and efficiency and supply chains and all of that, to suddenly this kind of rebirth, if you will, what it seems like from your CV as a marketing and a salesperson. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, it just happened because I was in a business. I was running a business that was heavily commoditized. And if there's a listener out there that doesn't understand that, that means my margins were constantly being threatened. I couldn't, if I needed a forklift driver, and rightly so, I was always competing against individuals or companies that could provide a forklift driver for, 15 an hour. I couldn't do that, or whatever my overhead. There was just constant pressure on the margins. And I quickly realized that to deal in a commoditized market like that, it's all predicated on relationships. There's a trust. So, for example, conversations I would always have would be, hey, I need a forklift driver. Use that as a use case. I need a forklift driver. And I need that forklift driver for X, 15 an hour. And, in my mind, I know exactly what's going on, but I trust Joe over here, and he's a good forklift driver or whatever. In a commoditized world, it is relationship driven. So you better know, and that trust. Joe is going to deliver. I'm not going to have any worries with Joe.
Right.
I might have a worry with you, but I don't know you. So I've got to figure out that relationship.
Of course, it seems though, it's not only a commoditized world. As business gets more complicated, risk aversion grows, and complex, big ticket purchases have a lot of risk associated with them, and so the trust becomes really important there as well.
Huge, and we can't gloss over that, and especially now when I speak to a number of companies and we start talking about that connected assets, those digitization, digital twin, all of these buzzwords that exist out there today. The reality is, me, Scott MacKenzie, Scott Manufacturer, whatever it might be, I don't have the bandwidth. I'm too busy running my business, but I hear that I have to do this stuff.
Right.
But so I've got to find somebody that I trust, that can help me along with this journey. And that's the reality of it. It just is, or you're going to be left behind. You just are.
So you talked about the shift to marketing where you had to build trust, but obviously you had a very strong sales background. I mean, you don't take a company public with a roadshow without being a heck of a salesperson. So where did that salesmanship come from? Did you just figure it out on your own or what?
Yeah, but it's pretty much, I've always been it. If you're running a company, I mean, I guess you could get all dialed in with the details and the minutia of the business, and a lot of manufacturers do, because they started their company. But I'll tell you right now, everyone is passionate about sales, making that bottom line, and figuring out how to do that effectively. And that's what kept me awake at night. I'm just telling you right now.
Right.
Am I hitting the targets that I need? Do I need to do something else?
And as we've talked on your show, the fascinating thing to me is that companies, industrial manufacturers, tend to put so much thought and energy and rigor into process engineering, continuous improvement, managing the operations and production of the business. And very rarely do they put analogous thought and process into the revenue growth side, into the marketing and sales side. It's a huge opportunity.
Huge. And it just, I was obsessed with it, obsessed. And in the world, when I started really diving into marketing, right, I had to sort of a come to Jesus type of event in my life. Meaning, I just said, "Well, Scott, you got to understand this marketing side. You're handing it off. You're not serious about it. There's opportunity there, and you got to figure it out. Get off your butt and do it." And that's what really was the sort of the watershed moment in my life, that from a business perspective, I just said, you got to do it. And for me, fortunately for me, it turned out to be very exciting, very interesting. It fit, and me being a guy that I just love data. It's about data too, Right. So it turns out to be a really interesting. It's like, oh, that's cool.
So you made this leap to marketing at a time when many industrial companies just kind of treated it as a redheaded stepchild, and you embraced it. And then you had this epiphany that marketing actually meant media, or could be substantially enhanced by media. And that, I think you said, that really just was a thought that struck you one day driving back from a meeting.
Yeah. If I am committed to the fact that I believe that it's all about relationships, and I believe that people consume information in many forms, I believe that the video and audio, that personal touch, would have an impact. And it does, because now everybody's, they can see your face. So it's like, oh, yeah, look at Ed. He's a nice guy. Oh, that's cool. I'm watching him. And it's just that you become familiar with that individual. And so every time when I do something, it's always a video. It's always audio, video. And I even transcribe for those that don't want to look at my face. They want to read it.
So this is about, you call it media. We can also often call it content, and content is obviously written stuff. It's web pages, it's webinars, it's podcasts, it's audio, it's video, it's all of that. But, and there's a big but, in the industrial manufacturing world, my experience is that you mention content to a lot of folks and they just break out in hives.
Oh yeah.
Why does this idea of content elicit such resistance?
I think there's a level of understanding that they believe that they have to sit down at a computer and try to write something. Now I can't do that. Me personally, I can't do that. I'll chat. So I think that there's a misunderstanding that you have to do that way. But there are so many tools and solutions that are out there that'll help generate the content. And the reality is, Ed, as well as I do, you have to be generating content. Big, small, who knows? It doesn't even have to be that big,
right?
But you have to be consistent in doing that. And I found it very beneficial for me to be able to generate my content, what I feel comfortable in doing, and that's speaking. and then use the tools that I can transcribe, and then I can sort of pull out the stuff that makes sense and do quotes. Um, but it's all available and it's all there, and it's not a heavy lift.
So your first idea was, you call it a Trojan horse of marketing.
Yeah.
In essence, an opportunity to just contact people, to have conversations, and to build some trust.
Yeah.
But then obviously it evolved. And so tell me about that evolution. And was there a particular inflection point when you said, okay, now this really has legs as a model?
Yeah. I'd have to say that, one, I started out in a way that's like, here I'm learning. I'm learning curve now, where trying to sort of find where I need to fit.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any expectations on the fact that it would open any doors, or I just was just trying. And you can. And it's all today versus when I started. I mean, even the equipment is even more user friendly, so you don't have to, think too much.
Right.
But at the beginning, it was more just like, okay, let's have these conversations. Okay, cool. Oh, these are opening doors. Oh, cool. That's about it. Nothing more. Typical guy type of approach. Well, cool. But then I can't. I did a conference. So this is somebody says, "Hey Scott, you want to do a conference?" And of course, I'm thinking to myself, "You're an idiot, Scott." And so you say yes. Had no idea, and I just said, "Yeah, I'll do a conferit."
And then the rest is history, as they say.
And that's it. And that was it. And it started out doing these conferences, and it was. I just didn't know. And I set up things, and one thing led to another, and then turned out to be pretty cool. I'm having these conversations with different companies about different topics that are, for me, fortunately for me, I geek out on this stuff. So everything's sort of a Discovery Channel opportunity for me to enjoy. And that was really it. And then I realized that the people of industry don't get the level of appreciation that they deserve.
Right.
That we just take for granted. I mean, we just, as a consumer, we just take for granted.
But I think a large part of that is that they don't know how to tell their stories, or they don't think there's value in telling their stories. They say, okay, we've got 170,000 square feet. We've got 17 of these machines. We've, do this and that, and they don't tell the story. And your part of the magic, I think, that you've illustrated is that it's not just content. It's not just a conversation. It's telling a story.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that we're sort of in this Renaissance period. It's just interesting because of all of the changes that are taking place within industry. It's more important to tell that story and to be able to communicate what is going on for many in industry, manufacturing, whatever. For many, that's a heavy lift. I understand all that. And many are very humble and they want to toot their horn or whatever it might be. And again, many just find themselves in the trenches trying to make sure that I make payroll and I'm doing what I need to do. I think that once companies recognize the necessity to market and aggressively market, and it's pennies on the dollar, quite frankly, pennies on the dollar, then they'll realize the necessity to tell the story and to be able to tell that story in a more entertaining way. I understand that.
There's two sides of the story, right? There's the side, the way we've seen the story unfold internally over the years, our product roadmap, the tweaks, the inventions, the this, the that. Yeah. But then there's the story from the perspective of the market and connecting that story to the business outcomes. And you seem to have a great ability to pull that out as well as to sit down with somebody who's naturally reserved, very focused on technical details, often an engineer, for instance, maybe hesitant to be in front of a camera, doesn't like to be recorded, is hesitant about what to say because they've got this idea about their limited expertise, and you get them talking. So how do you do both of those? How do you extract the story from the buyer's perspective, and how do you get those people that aren't so excited about talking to start talking?
Yeah, quite simply, I look at it from my perspective is if you came over to my house, and you're there visiting, and you're drinking my beer, and we sit down. What do? You just have a conversation. You ask. It's not meant to be something that is sit down and pepper them with
Interrogate them.
No, it's sit down and say, hey, you enjoying that beer? Hey, I saw that you went to that university or you worked at that company. It's all out there on LinkedIn. You can find the little connections and ask questions about, hey, you having a good conference? You having a good, where do you live? Oh, I was there. I had a great sandwich at this place. Things like that.
Right.
And then you realize there's that human component. And then it just sort of rolls from there. And granted, I can understand it, but it disarms them.
Sure.
Disarms them in a way that all right.
You completely take it out of the realm of millimeters and pounds per square inch and torque pounds and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and honestly, those conversations are every bit as interesting for me. Just because I, been very fortunate to be able to travel around and did you go there? Yes, I did. I like that place too. It's just that simple, and that's how you do it.
So then you found that this ability and this method and this outreach to have conversations actually kind of created another opportunity. So I think companies maybe had you start reaching out to conduct interviews for case studies. Yeah. And then in the course of reaching out, you discovered that it actually became a fantastic prospecting tool as well, because a prospect who might not necessarily entertain a call from a sales rep to talk about, a new machine where they've already got 5 of them on their floor might be very willing to entertain a call from you to say, hey, we want to tell your story. Are you willing to talk to us? Yep. So you've really turned this content creation and media into a prospecting business. Is that fair?
It is. So the way it normally works, I have out on my Industrial Academy just why you need a podcast. It's just because of this, because of that. And they're quick hits, but it's important to be able to say company A, whatever your name is, okay. And I'll say, yeah, you have targets, you have prospects, you have companies and individuals in your sales list, whatever it is, you have it. You'd be amazed that a lot of people don't.
I would not be surprised. We've talked about that.
Yeah, they're winging it at best.
Yep.
Don't wing it. Anyway, so you have your target list. What better way to be able to just sort of knock on the door, create the relationship? And that's all I did with my other business that I sold. I just sort of knocked on the door, created the relationship, got the contract, and then I just sort of sold that. That's what you're just doing, is you're just saying, Scott, we would like for you to contact this company. And all I do is like, okay, I'll contact it. Hey, I hear you have this widget. It's a fantastic widget. I think the listeners of Industrial Talk would like to hear more about it. Tell your story.
Right.
That's it. And then once you do that, once you have that conversation, non-threatening, just cool stuff, then you're in. You create a friendship. You create a relationship.
And then how do you make the handoff to the company that's engaged you to create that?
Right. It's like, hey, by the way, in that conversation, of course, I'm going to say, hey, how do you deal with this challenge, whatever the challenge might be, knowing full well that company has a great solution to deal with that challenge. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, well, that's a good question. And we're still sort of, wrestling with it, whatever it might be. And then you say, after the fact, not during the conversation, after the fact, and say, I couldn't help but hear you say that you're struggling. Here's a company. This company has a phenomenal opportunity. You can trust them. And I think that sometimes I'll make a call right off the bat. Say, let's have a call right now. Mm-hmm. So I'll get on the phone right then and there and say, hey, Steve, oh, we got this guy here. And anyway, you do that. You hand it off, and they have that conversation. And for me, there's a trust. Again,
There we are, back to that word.
that's it. I'm not going to bust anybody's chops by any means. It's supposed to be entertaining in a sense,
Right.
and informative. So that's how you do it. And but again, the challenge I deal with is there's a learning curve on their side. That do they trust it? Do they understand it? The amount of conversations I have to explain what this is about is voluminous.
Well, and I'll say very honestly, I spent a lot of time in the marketing and sales world, and it's taken me listening to you 2 or 3 times explaining it for me to really kind of wrap my brain around it.
Yeah, and of course, I'll be the first to admit that I didn't wander into this thinking that. I just wanted to open a door. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't have any expectation that it would have evolved into what we do today, and I can understand it, but it's just that simple. It's not difficult, because I think personally that you've been in companies. They really make things pretty complicated. And it doesn't have to be complicated. And I think you get better results when you try to pursue a more simple solution in that, whatever it might look like.
And I guess simple is human to human.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm bullish on this stuff just because I think we're part of a very unique group of people who call industry as their profession, whatever it might be. And I use industry just because it encompasses so much. But I think that we're part of a special group, and there's no need for us to not be a part of this, fraternity, sorority, whatever you want to be, to get things done more effectively and efficiently. And that comes you have to have the conversations, you have to have the relationships, you have to do that.
Right.
No other way of getting around it. You just,
So speaking of efficient, you create massive amounts of content. And so you must have a very efficient workflow. What's your daily and weekly workflow look like? Put aside traveling. When you're in your office or your studio, how do you manage it all?
That's a great question too. One, if I'm in my studio and I have a backlog of interviews, which I get from the conferences, right? I'll try to publish either 3 to 5 times a week. Podcast, because the conversations there, I have the content, and so I publish.
Right.
I'm efficient at publishing. I know my editing capabilities, and it's routine now.
You do your own editing.
I do. Yeah. Okay. I don't hand it off to anybody. I do it myself. Then because of that, I have I use a product that's called Social Jukebox. It's just like anything else. It's an RSS feed type of solution where it auto posts. There's some limitations there. This is my play with that. So I'm auto posting all the content. It just keeps on just sort of randomizing the posts. Whether you like it, give it a thumbs up. The bottom line is that there's an attention, sort of like a TV commercial, right? You're not going out and you're watching a TV commercial. You're not giving it a thumbs up, but you have an impression. It's there. Mm-hmm. You might just flatline, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter, but it's there. They see your name. They understand what you're about. It embodies that. The same thing exists when you have these auto-populating things. You just do it, and people see it. and you might get a couple of likes here and there. Fine. But that's not what I'm shooting for. I'm shooting for awareness.
Right.
And so that's all automated. I use robots for my website, my little, messaging robot, and all it is the same thing. Hey, you want to be on podcast? And it works.
Mm-hmm.
But I really try to automate as much as I possibly can.
And how about exercise, diet tips, anything else that kind of gives you the edge? You've got this energy that just never fades, even with long work days and massive content creation.
I work out every day. I try to watch what I eat. I don't at conferences. That's a pain.
Right.
That doesn't work worth a lick. But but I think the energy and the passion comes from the fact that I really like this stuff. It's exciting. I'll give you a case in point. I was at a conference last week. This is an organization that develops standards, industrial standards, not just standards that go into your phone, like standards, industry standards.
Mm-hmm.
And they're wrestling with topics that are emerging, and that's AI. How do you create guardrails and standards around AI that you can trust? Trust is it. You got to trust these standards. And so here's an organization and its members, and what they do is they debate. They passionately debate what needs to be a part of it and what doesn't need to be a part of it. And that to me is exciting. There's no other way that I can get around. Here at this particular event, we're going to be talking about asset management and how do you make facilities run more efficiently. And of course, connected assets, all of the stuff that's associated with that too as well. That's interesting, and it's happening. And I still think that there's still more to happen.
And I point out, of course, that you've never worked for a company that does asset management software, but you're able to elicit the information and have conversations about asset management. That's something that I wish more industrial manufacturers understood, that you don't have to be a quote unquote expert in a space to collect experts to come and talk to you and share their insights and make you a source of information.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Ed. I normally take the position that I don't know, which is pretty common. and you're teaching me, and I figure that's a good position to be in, and they teach me,
right?
And I just don't want to be that guy at a party that is a blowhard know-it-all.
Right. So everyone says, you need diversified revenue streams. You need multiple legs to your business. Yeah. And you've got a number. You've got merch. Number one, you've got merch. So anybody that wants to start a hat collection as impressive from yours, the first place to go might be to come and grab one of your hats off your site.
You want to know the story about that?
Yeah. What's the story?
The story is just, I looked at it on the World Wide Web and said, somebody needs to create merch. And I said, wow, I'll do it. And I just did it. It's all doable stuff.
Right.
Now, can I do a better job? Oh, hell yeah, I can. But it was just, you should have seen me. It's like, hey, I created a store. And
in all your spare time.
Yeah, it's just like, but again, we're at a really interesting time and in the world of content creation that the tools that are available are not ridiculously expensive. They're powerful. They exist. You just have to just do it, and it works. It works.
Yeah, I mean, it takes some lessons learned along the way, and you're going to put some stuff up that looks silly at first, and that's okay. People are very forgiving.
Yeah, everybody is. Yeah, exactly.
So you got merch, and then you create content for companies in the form of, I think you do some white label podcasts, you do podcasts for them on your Industrial Talk podcast. You speak. Yep. Maybe that's a third leg. Fourth leg, you create or you've got a number of sponsors for the content that you create. Yep. Fifth, you've got this Industrial Academy. Yep. And six, you go and you do these trade show gigs or these conference gigs where you set up a broadcast booth on behalf of an organization or the organizers of the show. What am I missing? What else? I mean, you're doing so many things. I'm sure I missed something.
That keeps going. And
each of those are complementary to the other. They've kind of built on each other as your business model has evolved, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So let's talk about speaking. What kind of speaking engagements do you do?
Well, that's great. So because and again, Ed, I wasn't quote unquote a speaker,
Hmm.
right? I was just a guy running a company that needed to open doors, and I just decided to put myself out there, and lo and behold, now I guess I'm considered a speaker. I haven't taken any courses in speaking or
Maybe
anything.
we'll even call you a thought leader and an influencer. How's
Yeah,
that?
that's exactly right. And then it's like I didn't do any of that. So
Right.
you just do. And so in the case of speaking, I've done keynote speaking on marketing, and as well as MC work. Like apparently, I don't take myself too seriously, and people like that. And I come from the perspective of knowing. So meaning I'm not just a speaker that been trained in speaking, and so I would say certain buzzwords. No, it's the fact that I've been in that manufacturing environment, so I can say, hey, that's pretty cool. I
Right.
remember when
Right.
things like that, all very positive, and so that's sort of the typical speaking, and then I'll do some training, you know and then I realized, well, why do I need to do training when they can just do it online? And it's one of those things, and I'll just add to it.
Hmm.
And that's where the Industrial Academy came from. This came from as a result of saying, well, Scott, you might be able so that you look at the path of content generation. I do small stuff, which I call them technology sprints,
Hmm.
small, 3 to 5. And then
So 3 to 5 minutes, you mean?
3 to 5 minutes. Yeah,
Okay.
3 to 5 minutes. And then I'll do something with a little bit more meat to it, and that's a podcast and video podcast right there. And then I'll need a little bit more meat to describe something else, and that might be a webcast of some sort, which I can do for, let's say, 45 minutes. You can have a presentation, but more information. And then finally, you're saying, this could be a class, this could be a program that has multiple phases, and that's an academy thing where you're just teaching. You're saying, all right, in the world of why you need a podcast, you need this mic, and the reason you need this mic is because of XYZ. The
Right.
mic is this, that, and the other thing. It's less conducive to a podcast. It just
Hmm.
is. You're not going to talk about that, but in the world of an academy. So that's how I sort of break up the content development in the amount. So, and that's how that rolled. And again, did I know how to create an academy, something behind? No, just do it. And it's like, hey, it worked.
Yeah, there's that entrepreneurial irreverence.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
how to do it, but I'm going to figure it out.
Well, why not?
Right.
And it is sort of fun. And you would, if you knew me, let's say 6 years ago, and I'm modifying a website, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and it's all technology based. But the reality is that I don't have to code. You don't have to code. So it's all, drag and drop, and
Right.
it's pretty intuitive. So anybody, don't come to me and complain that you can't do it. Don't.
All right. Speaking of not doing, you spent a lot of time at trade shows, and you and I have stood
Yeah.
together in the
Yeah.
aisle at trade shows on a couple of occasions,
Yeah. Yeah.
watching people work their booths.
Yeah.
So contrast for me what you see as the best and the worst practices at industrial trade shows these days.
I'll go right to the worst.
Okay.
The follow up. They do a horrible job at following up.
Let me take that one step further. In many cases, they don't even start or begin or care about follow-up. It's not that they do it poorly. They don't do it.
They don't do it at all. It drives me absolutely bonkers.
Yep.
And they'll spend the thousands and thousands and thousands of
Hundreds.
dollars, hundreds of thousands, yeah, to be at an event. And then they staff it, and they just spend all this money, and they don't have a clue about how to follow up.
Yep.
They just don't. And it just, my ears start bleeding, and I just don't know what to do. So conversely, the ones that do, so this is interesting. So I'll be brought in by companies, and I'll do podcasts. And one thing that
From their booth at the show, you mean?
yeah.
Okay.
So what they do want, this is a great follow-up. The individual never goes away. So if I interview you at this particular show, and I ask you questions about you and what you are doing and all of that fun stuff, you're never going away. You want that podcast.
So me, in this case, I'm a visitor to the booth of your client at the trade show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you sit down and you meet whatever the requirements are. Ed's capable of putting the money together. He's in the right space, whatever the criteria is.
Right.
Sit down. You have a conversation. Ed's never going away. Ed wants his podcast. And so the follow-up is just magically in that process. And not only that, you have the follow-up, but you have that relationship. And then not only that, I'll sit there and say, hey, Steve, come on over here and meet Ed. Ed right here. Here's Ed. And it's real time right now.
Right.
And Ed will never go away.
Right.
Never.
That's fascinating. I've got a variety of trade show beefs. The follow-up is certainly a huge one. But in my experience, many companies don't set targets. They spend this money, they budget this money, they allocate it, they spend months planning, they take the entire sales force off the street, and there isn't a target for how many leads they're going to get, what those leads look like, what's qualified. They don't do the sales math on return. How many deals do they have to put in the pipeline? How many deals do they have to close based on lifetime value? They don't have dashboards to track the follow-up and return. No. They don't engage visitors in their booth digitally to set a cookie if you're in the U.S., set a cookie, build a relationship digitally with the person. They don't assign reps specific research tasks into different competitors and adjacent technologies while they're at the show. Yeah. And then, of course, most of all, the follow-up. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's, in many cases, no defined expectation for the time to the first follow-up, much less a 10-step omni-channel outreach with email and phone and direct mail and social and the variety of tools that are available. It's just mind-blowing that they spend this money and don't track and follow up the leads.
None. And it happens all the time.
Even with companies that are incredibly thoughtful and proficient in the products they make and the way they make them, there's just this different mindset with sales and marketing.
Yeah, I don't understand. And the reality is, one, the tools are available. Right. They're not that difficult.
But you know what I think is missing?
What's that?
Accountability.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that one.
All right, wave your magic wand. You're the president of or let's say that you've got sitting around the conference table in front of you, the president, VP of sales, and VP of marketing of an industrial manufacturer 3 months before the show. What are you telling them they have to do to maximize the impact?
Oh, just exactly what you
Besides
just
hire you.
Yeah, that's exactly. I would say, Ed, come on over here and let's talk a little bit about a strategy that we need to deploy. We're going to this particular show, and I want to establish expectations. And these expectations are around, of course, sales and follow up, and be able to do that pre. So I always take a sort of a 40, 20, 40 type of, is that 100? Yeah, that's 100. 40, 20, 40 approach. There's a lot of pre-work that I would always do. That means establish those expectations. Make sure that
not 7:30 in the morning in the booth before the show opens.
That's exactly correct. There's pre-work. If I'm spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this thing, I better know exactly what I'm doing. Right. That's one thing. Then 20%, of course, you have that expectation on how you engage individuals at the conference, and then 40, boom, you do it. There's no other place. And honestly, if you don't feel comfortable in doing that, let's say I'm Scott Manufacturer and I feel more comfortable with manufacturing and all of that stuff, that's fine. Find somebody to help define all that. Right. They're out there. Right. And trust them.
And that's not a company that designs a trade show booth. That's a company that understands marketing and sales and management and sales management, all of those in order to help you create that structure.
It's pennies on the dollar when you get right down to it. If you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars at an event, you're shipping all the people in and you're shutting your salespeople down. Do it. Right. Do it right. Don't mess around.
So let's talk about fun. It seems like you have so much fun doing what you do that maybe that's your hobby and your career. But do you play golf? Do you have time? Are you a bourbon fan? What really lights Scott up when you're not behind a microphone?
That is a great question because I enjoy this stuff so much. I think about it. I read about it. And when I say I read about it, I'll look at new tools that are out there. This is my hobby in a sense. I don't play golf. I don't. I drink some bourbon here and there, but I went down that road. I like cigars, but for the most part, this is it.
I think you've got some cool guitars in your studio, if I remember correctly. Do you play guitar?
And I'm so horrible. And then I get distracted. I don't sit down just like any other instrument. If you don't focus and concentrate on that, forget it.
Right.
You just don't. And I'll pick it up, and then I'll get distracted by some other shiny object that.
So, who's your industrial academy intended for?
Pretty much anybody.
So
anybody
CEOs and directors of marketing.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Okay.
And it's freaking dirt cheap. It just sort of it doesn't cover anything. It's just something. Here's me saying, "Hey, I'm going to have something behind a paywall." What? It's $9. Don't go for a latte. If $9 is going to break you, don't go for a latte.
And do they get a nice certificate at the end?
Yeah. And see, this is a WordPress plugin. This company's called Lifter LMS, and it does everything. Again,
got it. So back to your point about automating, using technology, easy to use, forgiving.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. It's just. Come on, as well as I do. These tools that are out here, if you made it complex, if you made it difficult, nobody would use it because these companies need to strive for simplicity. That's what they're doing. They have to, or nobody's going to buy it.
If IT has to make the decision and set it up and support it, it's not going to happen. So you got to have knuckle draggers like me that can figure it out.
There it is. That's exactly correct, and you can. Look at you. Look at all mic'd up and everything. Headphones. Yeah, see? All doable.
Right. All right. So an industrial manufacturer, the president's sitting there listening to this saying, you know what, it makes sense. I understand emotionally I need to do this. Intellectually, it just feels kind of overwhelming. It's too much to undertake. Help me understand, how much of this will you do for a company on a white label basis?
Oh, everything. I'll do everything.
So you'll create and run their podcast for them
easily.
Okay.
Yeah. And and go through all of the little, uploadings and all of that stuff. And not only that, not just the podcast, but even the mining, the pursuit of target companies. Right. That you want to create the relationship with. There's a fine line. One, just FYI, once you begin podcasting, it's a taskmaster. Mm-hmm. You got to keep current. You got to keep moving. You got to keep producing, whether you like it or not. That's where many fail.
But I guess if they're hiring you, then all they have to do is get out of bed in the morning, and you're taking care of it for them, right?
That's exactly correct. Exactly correct. The balance too now is. One, do you use Industrial Talk and leverage the name of Industrial Talk? If that's the right strategy, we can have that conversation. Or do you want to start your own podcast with your own name and all of that stuff? There are different things. Now, what I can do and what I have done is I can highlight your podcast on my website, right? And be sort of the industrial Spotify of podcasts. So that's also an option because I get a lot of people going to my website, and there's so many ways. It just the reality is that you don't want to start it and then just stop it and then say it's not. It's just, right. Don't waste anybody's time that way.
But you can also go into a company, I know because I've introduced you to clients that have had you do this. You can go in and just because of your interviewing skills and your comfort eliciting information from people. Sit down with their SMEs or subject matter experts and just get them talking. People who would never sit with a journalist or would struggle to sit with a writer and tell them what's going on. You're able to just suck that out in conversation and then hand off a transcript to a writer to turn it into a story.
Yeah. Yep.
So what do you say to an executive that says, okay, maybe we allocate some resources for this, but we're not a publishing company. Our marketing budget is 0.5% of revenue because that's what we spend on trade shows. What should their budget be, and how should they rethink allocation of resources for marketing?
Yeah, there's a huge education component there. And it's they've got to recognize that there's something missing in their business, and I think that getting them to understand that it's missing.
But what's that missing thing? And that's an interesting question, because for many, they're growing, call it 3% a year. Now, maybe 5% of that is coming from price increases, but they're growing. They don't want to scale like a software company. They want it to be manageable. They don't want it to be out of control. And so they think that they're doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't speak to that. I think that you're right about it. But I think that there is a strategic value of being able to put in something that is a marketing platform that is beneficial to you, and do it now. If you're making money, you're pulling in cabbage, that's great, that's good. You can do more, but I think the reality is that that's a strategic conversation. If they think that 3-5% is fine, then that's a tough conversation to have, to say, no, you want to do more. But I think that
or even as buyers change and customer expectations shift and market expectations evolve, will you likely be doing that in 5 years, or do you have to change now in order to maintain that momentum?
And it's all doable. And I can't speak for the budget. I know how I sort of roll. I try to keep it relatively inexpensive, just because I have a different purpose. And my purpose is to, again, educate and collaborate and all of that stuff. If I make it prohibitive in how I gain the content, then people are not learning, and it sort of collapses on itself. So I'm very sensitive to that.
My experience is that top level companies industrial manufacturers are putting 5 to 7% of revenue into marketing. That's unusual. They tend to be larger. For a mid-sized company, somewhere 2 to 5%, I think is very realistic, but substantially more than most are putting into it right now.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of pick at a scab a little bit.
Yeah.
The integration of marketing and sales. And you've worn both hats. You got both perspectives. It used to be marketing planned the carpet and pad for the trade show booth and maybe ran a couple print journal ads, and sales was basically responsible for everything else.
Yeah.
But now we know buyers are 70% of the way through their buying journey before they want to talk to a sales rep. How have you seen that change occur, and how do you see it impacting companies?
Yeah, that's an interesting, because the reality is that I think it's even higher than 70%. I think
could be.
I look at me. I'm not talking to anybody. I look at all of the marketing and information that exists out there before I even have a conversation. I do. And when I'm ready to buy, I'm ready to buy. But it doesn't come through a individual. This is just me. That is saying, hey, Scott, you should, let's have a cup of coffee. It's just, that's just how I roll. I don't want to have a cup of coffee. Let me just review everything that I have out there. Right. And if that's the case, then you better have that content available, or somebody else. And it's got to be a way that is approachable, consumable, I'm not using too much of my, intellectual calories to consume it for me to make a decision, or it's got
to be in writing for some people. It's got to be in video for other people. It has to be in graphics for other people.
It does.
It has to also go well back before they're actually at the point of saying, should I buy this or not? Yeah. But even awareness and pre-awareness. Help me understand. I've got this frustration. this is a symptom. What does that mean that my problem likely is? And how do I understand and quantify that problem? And how do I go about thinking about fixing that problem? And only after a fairly extensive journey, here's how we think our product or service helps you to overcome that problem.
You do, but to do that, you better understand the problem.
Of course.
And if you don't understand the problem, then you're just developing content that doesn't meet the needs of the market, or hit the target, and that gets into the conversation of, will you pop up at the top of the Google search or whatever it might be? That's all that SEO stuff that from my point, I see it. The way I deal with it, it's like a black box, quite frankly. But the reality is, you better be engaged on understanding what the problem is. And but I think it's simple, Ed. You better have that information out there that speaks to the problem and delivers it in an entertaining way.
Right.
I just, as well as I do, that there's a lot of information out there, a lot of nuts and bolts conversation, and maybe that's just way too much. I'm just looking for something to begin to and take me on a journey,
right.
And then I'll make the decision on whether I want to expel more intellectual calories than that's me.
Right.
If you catch me, then maybe I'll take the next step and then the next step. But I'm doing all the research, and then I'll reach out to you.
So what should marketing know about sales, and what should sales know about marketing? Because this buying journey bounces all around, and that person following that journey, making those micro decisions along the way, sometimes they're engaging with marketing, sometimes they're engaging with sales. What should each of them really understand about the other?
I think that, one, I think that, again, strategically, the thought of sales and marketing being two different silos and never the two shall meet, that exists today, and that's not the way it should. There's the marketing and sales, I believe, need to be connected at the hip in some way, be whatever that looks like internally, and whatever the marketing information that is being produced aligns with the sales objectives of the company. And because I look at marketing as sort of the blood pressure of it's of the organization. It just keeps pushing, but it has to be aligned. And if they're not, if you have a conversation of like, you're looking at your marketing and your marketing materials, and it's talking about this particular problem, but everybody in sales is talking about that particular problem, there's a disconnect.
Right.
You can't have that. And I think today more than ever, it's converging. I don't see how you can separate that out. I don't see.
Yeah, I think it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the journey that companies have to take.
Yep.
But they can take it gradually. They can incrementally improve. If we think of it as a maturity model or whatever, they can gradually select priorities and work on them. The one thing that really does have to be blown up is this idea of silos between marketing and sales, because they have to be deeply integrated.
They absolutely, positively agree.
Now, you've spent a lot of time in a variety of executive roles and, doing M&A. So you've got a very high level perspective. You work now with CEOs to paint the picture for them of what they should be doing, but then you work very tactically with their directors and individual contributors to get it done. Kind of jumping back up to that high level that I know you bring, what should the board of directors be asking executive management about marketing and sales and revenue growth plans?
Well, again, it's one of those things where, one, what are the problems? What are the challenges, right? What are we dealing with? And so it's from that perspective. So there's that conversation. But the reality is that are you actually aligned? I think that's I know if I'm an executive, I know what my challenges are, where I want to go, and how I'm trying to get there. And then that organization aligned in such a way that it knows that are addressing my problems, that are laying out that roadmap, that are accomplishing the objectives that I've laid out in the world of what I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. If they are not, if you have a sense of frustration, if you don't have clarity into that, you're You've got a disconnect.
Right.
And I don't see how you cannot. You cannot. You got the operations. The operations is the operations, and it's going to continue to sort of operate as efficiently as you possibly can. And that's sort of the reality. But two, if you don't have, and I had this come to Jesus type of reality, if you don't have the fact that you're committed to your marketing and sales and understanding the right budget and understanding that strategy, you better have it. And that conversation is, and it's not a heavy lift, but if you're out of a line and you're out of sync, and yeah, I'm all into operations, but you're not thinking about that. That to me is where the rubber meets the road. And I think when I was running those companies, I was all into the marketing and sales.
Yeah, it's a gap. In my
Right.
experience, it's a gap on many middle market industrial manufacturing boards. They've got operations, they've got finance, they've got some M&A, they've got engineering. They don't have marketing and sales, and it's a huge blind spot for them.
Huge, massive, and that to me is a big problem.
Right.
Big problem. And I can't reiterate that enough. And I was there, and I came to the realization that, Scott, you're not doing a good job.
Right.
You're just not.
You mentioned earlier about when you want to learn something. So where do you turn? What blogs do you read? What YouTube channels do you watch? What podcasts do you listen to?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I do these conferences. I interview the people I want to learn from.
Great point.
And it's sort of it's a selfish thing. And sure, sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose, but the reality is that I'm learning from the best industrial leaders out there.
Fabulous.
That I am.
Now, in addition to all the other aspects of your business, you're also an author. I know that you and Susie recently published Business Beatitudes, and we're recording this here just before Easter, so it's an appropriate time. Tell me about that book.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said about if you know anything about the Beatitudes, it's in essence saying be kind, be generous, be humble, that type of thing, and the same thing I believe exists in business. If you reflect similar traits, the humility, the desire to help people, generous, these qualities that understanding, forgiveness, those qualities I believe are very powerful in the world of business.
Right.
Yes, it's touchy feelies. Yes, it's not nuts and bolts. Yes, it's not this, that, and the other thing. But I think there's some financial and organizational benefits that are gained by that. And author.
So you may not consider yourself set out to be a speaker, but you're speaking. And you may not have set out to be an author, but guess what? Where are you today?
It's harder because when I taught at some universities, you have to be prepared, right? And I never wanted to just sort of wing it. So you just got to be prepared.
All right. So you're talking with a lot of people. You're engaged in a lot of conversations. You're bouncing back and forth between high-level business conversations and tactical execution conversations. Based on what you're seeing, what worries you the most about the current business environment?
I think it's speed. There's a speed that exists there. There's a desire to try to figure out. I think that speed is creating behaviors that maybe are not. There's more panic in that sense from a business perspective. I think cybersecurity is a big conversation to have. One of the largest ones that I way above my pay grade is how do you find and retain talent, people, and in such a way that ensures business continuity. Is our education system nimble enough to help backfill these individuals, or do we need to change the way we educate people? Right. Those are some of the questions that again, I'm glad I don't have a big workforce again, because I just, the turnover it's a pain. It's just a pain.
All right, flip it around.
Yeah.
The speed also creates opportunity. So what do you think are the most exciting opportunities for business over the next 5 years?
I think there's a lot to be had in the world of Well, I'll rifle it off. I think robotics is cool. I think that there's digital twin, anything that deals with uh, data. Data. Everybody's trying to gain data, trying to gain that insights, trying to leverage that data in such a way that reveals some tactical solutions and benefits. So data was a big topic of conversation as well. Uh, that's really automation is it's exciting. I think it's all there. I think one of the areas that we need to do a better job in saying that industry as a whole is not a dirty job. It's a very very skilled and advanced
Right.
type of it. So there's a ton. AI. How do you leverage AI?
Right.
How do you put guardrails? There's a ton of really exciting things that are on the horizon.
So somebody that's listening that's
Yeah.
interested in learning more, maybe having you run a podcast for them or help with content creation, how do they contact you? How do they find you? How do they connect with you?
Just go out to industrialtalk.com and say, contact me. And it's there, and it'll go right to me. And if you want to be on the podcast, you just let me know. I try to make the process as painless as possible. Again, I'm not going to want to make you jump through hoops. Just go out to Industrial Talk, find out more.
All right, so go and order some merch and get on your podcast and engage with Scott and begin to learn from him. He's like I said at the beginning, he's a force. So this has been a hell of a conversation, Scott.
I loved it.
Thank you very, very much. Wrap it up for us. Give us your meta level guidance for industrial manufacturers wondering what they need to do to adapt to today's market.
Yeah, don't come to me and complain. Don't even begin coming to me to complain and say that you can't do it. It'll fall on deaf ears. You can do it. The technology exists. You just have to just feel uncomfortable for a moment, but recognize the benefits associated with it. Don't come, just ask me. We're all about collaboration. Just ask.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you so much, Scott. And for everybody listening, I know that you will get as much out of Scott's high level and very specific actionable tips as I have. This has been packed full of both of those.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening and watching. Please don't forget, hit the bell, like it, share it, give it a comment or review. And by all means, please reach out to Scott for more of his insights. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, audience.